It's great to be back. It's been so long since I was able to make a new video, it feels like I'm starting over from scratch. But this is also the 50th video for my channel, and to celebrate this small milestone, I wanted to look back at a game that I played almost 30 years ago. Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo. This was Capcom's first Mega Man game for the 16-bit generation, and one of their greatest in the series. Back then, I thought this was a masterpiece game, and almost 30 years later, I played through it again to see if it held up the way I remembered it back then. So stick around for my retrospective of Mega Man X. Though the game didn't come out until January of '94, I first saw the game in Nintendo Power Volume 56. I had a subscription to the magazine, and in late 1993, the Mega Man X issue arrived in the mail. This is a pretty special issue as it came with an all-silver cardstock cover with the image of Mega Man embossed onto it. Underneath was the regular newsstand cover. The game was featured across 10 pages and included maps of the 8 Robot Masters stages. And to be honest, I thought this was originally Mega Man 10. Since many games used Roman numerals, that's what I assumed was happening here. Strangely, the last Mega Man game that I was aware of was Mega Man 4 for the NES, so I was thinking, what happened to 5 through 9? Shortly after, I learned that the main character in this game was named X, and this was an entirely new series altogether. The game looked awesome in the review, and I knew that this was the next game that I needed to have for the SNES. Unfortunately, the game missed the Christmas shopping season of 1993 by a few weeks, so I didn't get a hold of the game until the spring of '94. But when I finally took this game home from Toys R Us and popped it into my system, I was blown away. Prior to this, I had owned Mega Man 4 on the NES and was already enthralled with the series. X took the series to a whole new level of greatness. Everything was improved in this game. The story was more fleshed out, graphics were superior to Mega Man 4 in every way, and that's saying a lot because 4 was one of the best looking NES games at the time. On top of that, the stage layout, boss fights, and controls were all on point. There wasn't a bad thing that I could say about the game back then. One of the things that I really enjoyed was being able to go back into levels that were completed and search for hidden items that you might have needed a specific power-up to acquire. This led to many hours of backtracking, looking for all the items and upgrades. When I learned about the Hadouken power-up from Street Fighter, probably from a Nintendo Power issue, I lost my mind. I had to get it and spent huge amounts of time making that jump over and over again to trigger the upgrade. I know it's just a gimmick, but it was so cool throwing that fireball nonetheless. This game was amazing, but for some reason, I had lost interest in the series after this game and never played another Mega Man X game even to this day. That's why I've come back to this game. I want to play all the other Mega Man X games and decided to start back at the beginning. So how does this game compare now to back then? Well, I decided to try the version that's on the Mega Man X collection for the PlayStation 2, since I own that disc and haven't really put any time into it. These are versions of Mega Man X 1 through 6. Mega Man X and X2 are straight ports of the SNES version with some enhancements. You now have the ability to save your progress after each stage, instead of having to write down and enter a password each time. Also, the slowdown on the SNES is gone, which can be good in some places, but I found that it made some parts of stages much more difficult. Other than those two things, there's virtually no difference between the originals and these ports. The game opens with a cutscene explaining the history that separated the original Mega Man and X. I appreciate that the game has a narrative story, and one that you can skip if you just want to get into the action. This cutscene is pretty boring though. It's just an exposition dump, and I was a lot more interested in those things back then due to most games not having story or cutscenes in game at all. As for the game itself, I was really surprised at how much I remembered about the level layouts, considering that I haven't played this game since roughly 1995. In the intro city stage, I remembered every single jump, pitfall, and even the enemy placements. Many of the other stages I remembered pretty well too. Chill Penguin, Flame Mammoth, Armored Armadillo stages I pretty much had memorized even after all this time. Others like Launch Octopus and the Sigma Tower stages slowly came back to me as I played them. I kept having those moments where I thought to myself, oh yeah, I remember this now. To me, the fact that I remember so much about the game's stages shows how well these levels are designed. Think about it, pretty much everyone remembers stage 1-1 of Super Mario Bros. Beat for beat, because of just how perfect it was as an introductory stage. In terms of the Mega Man games, while not impossibly hard to complete, and nowhere near as cheap with the respawning as games like Ninja Gaiden, it took a lot of effort to beat a level. Overcoming the game's challenges is probably a contributing factor in remembering these stages so well. There really wasn't very many stages that were uninspiring and forgotten. Spark Mandrill and Storm Eagle were pretty plain with a few interesting areas. The only level I really didn't remember at all, and wasn't very fond of playing through, was the Sting Chameleon stage. I also remember not liking it too much as a kid either. In addition to the stage layout, I was also familiar with all the music in this game. Pretty much every stage background music was great to listen to, and I'm surprised about how many great songs from the Mega Man franchise are from this game specifically. When it comes to the music, this game is nearly perfect. The music was also pretty clear and lacked the typical overuse of reverb that's pretty common on the Super Nintendo and Capcom games in general. I actually had to break out the SNES version and see if the PS2 one had any enhancements to the music, and that version is also crisp and clear. It's really refreshing, as all my recollections of Capcom's music on both the SNES and Genesis is mostly substandard, with a few exceptions like Super Ghouls and Ghosts. The other thing that I remembered was the stage order, with a few exceptions. I always started with Chill Penguin, but followed that one up with Flame Mammoth, which isn't weak against the ice weapon for some reason. Still, that boss isn't that tough with the regular weapon. In fact, all the bosses had pretty recognizable patterns, though dodging them wasn't always as easy said as done. The only boss that I can't stand is Sting Chameleon, and I've never had an easy time with him, even when I had the right weapon. Overall, the boss design is nearly perfect. The final stages of the game have some crazy bosses that require you to perfect your platforming and timing skills. This additional challenge was welcome as it prepared me for the final boss. Most of this game was a breeze since I remembered so much, but Sigma, the final boss, was still a challenge. That final stage is iconic in this series. It's a giant elevator shaft that you have to wall jump through, seeming almost unending, and at the top is Sigma and his robot dog. You first have to fight the dog, then Sigma fights you in two different forms. The dog and Sigma Form 1 wasn't too bad, and it only took a few lives to relearn the pattern and timing. But that final form gave me a lot of trouble. I died a ton of times and used several continues to beat it. I actually like this because I feel that I wouldn't have gotten any satisfaction from the ending if I'd beaten him on my first attempt. This fight required precise positioning, timing, life and weapon managing, and awareness of how the boss is going to attack next. These are all indications of a well-designed boss fight. I can overlook a few uninspiring and boring stages, but there was one thing about this game that really bothered me now that I didn't really care that much about back in the 90s. That's the final stage and continue feature. Like other Mega Man games of the time, you get a password after beating each stage, with the exception of the final stage. In this game, it's the Sigma Tower. It's actually 4 stages with several bosses along the way. Unfortunately, the password you receive will always start you at the first segment. This is a big tease as you get a newly generated password after each stage segment, implying that you can turn off the system and continue from where you left off. This was annoying because I only had time to play this game in the morning before work while I was playing through this. When I died at Sigma and had to turn off the game to go to work, all my progress was lost, and the next day I had to spend time working through the Sigma stages 1 through 3 to get back to where I left off, giving me less time to practice the Sigma fight. Games today would give you a checkpoint at the start of stage 4, and while some people might say that it removes the challenge of completing the final group of stages, I feel otherwise. When I was a kid, it wasn't a big deal since I could spend all my free time playing through those levels again and again. But now that I'm an adult, my playing video game time is much more limited as I don't have that many hours to dedicate to a video game. It's much less fun as an adult having to replay the same stages over and over in what is essentially a time waster, since I can get through them without losing a life. I guess I could have emulated the game so I could create a save state at the final boss, but I was looking to not just play the game again, but to see if the game lived up to the pedestal that I'd placed it on all those years back. The game isn't perfect, but it comes pretty close. If you could only play a single Mega Man game, this is the one that I would recommend. The level design is top-notch, and some of Capcom's best designs ever. The graphics, sound effects, and music are top-notch with some incredibly memorable songs. None of its flaws are game-breaking, and it was an enjoyable experience to come back after all these years. Mega Man X stands the test of time as one of the best video games of the 16-bit era. No wonder Capcom continues to re-release this game on modern consoles, despite there not being a new Mega Man X game since 2004, almost 20 years ago. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on experiencing this game both when it first came out and in 2023. Despite being nothing new to me, I still had a blast with this game, and I'm wondering why I haven't picked up this title to replay in so long. I know that the later Mega Man X games are not considered to be very good, and Capcom seems to have lost faith in a successful sequel, but playing the first entry has gotten me excited to play the rest of the series, which will all be new experiences for me. I encourage you to check this game out if you've never played it before. These were my experiences with the game. I'd love to hear in the comments about yours. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then.